I apologize for the clickbait video title, but you are indeed here. And unfortunately, it's not clickbait. I'm very serious. This scene is important because of how it, and the scenes leading up to it, drive the motivations of the protagonist all the way through to the end. Welcome to The Breakdown, a series where I dig deep into the messaging of movies and shows. Blade Runner 2049 is actually one of my favorite movies, primarily for its messaging, but I guess Villeneuve wasn't counting on an entire internet subculture of maladjusted social outcasts identifying with Cade's lonesome existential crisis. Joy is an advanced version of an anime body pillow trad wife appealing to said lonely me pity party enthusiasts, and a superficial transfixation on neon glow cyberpunk dystopian aesthetics as being the movie's champions. My life. Of course, this particular set of the fanbase engages with the movie so superficially that it creates an outgroup of smug people who mock them, and in a similar ironic twist, engage with the material in the same shallow manner. To both these crowds, Drive and 2049 might as well be the same thing. In reality, it couldn't be further from the truth, as 2049 really does have a thoughtful message that such audiences would benefit from, even if it's a little challenging to squeeze out. This is actually an excellent movie to train your media literacy skills on because it has so many supporting elements and additional underlying themes that just gel so well together that it's really worth exploring. There's an ever-present environmentalist theme about how a society transfixed on conspicuous consumption will only try to fix the world after it's far too late. There's also another theme about how a patriarchal society tries to control women and their fertility and reduces them into sex object commodities used to reinforce the caste system that also puts the poor and replicants in second-class citizen status.
You can customize them as much as you'd like. I wouldn't waste your money on intelligence, attachment, or appeal, unless you'd like to add some pleasure models to your order.
There's also another theme about self-determination and breaking societal bonds through the character of love that I'm unfortunately only going to cover very briefly in this video, because I'm going to focus on the main theme and takeaway of this film. It essentially interrogates the audience to think about, what is objective importance? What is objective authenticity? What is objectively real? Rewatch closely and you'll notice that the word real pops up in nearly every single scene. Throughout the film, it demonstrates various extremes to make you realize how futile our ideas of objective really are. But it doesn't just leave you with a nihilistic view that nothing in the world matters and so ultimately everything is meaningless. Instead, it suggests that the meaning we ascribe something is what makes it important. So what is important is whatever is important to you. And to give yourself into something you believe is important is the most human and most real, genuine experience you can have. Okay, now to do the heavy lifting. How exactly does this movie say this? And why is this scene so important to that? If I was the editor, why couldn't I remove it? We'll have to cover the poem from the baseline test and some of the basics in novel Pale Fire. We'll have to cover Anastaline and really get into the details about this scene. We'll need to talk about Joy just entirely, and we have to cover these scenes, yes, including that one, in order to appreciate what the movie is telling us. Usually when a filmmaker inserts mention of another's work that most audiences would likely not be familiar with, they're doing it to call attention to a thread. A thread for anyone who's passionate enough to seek more about the movie would naturally follow. Doing this in a very striking scene early in the film really calls attention to it. In the baseline test, Kay recites an excerpt from Vladimir Nabokov's Pale Fire. The actual book is kind of weird. It's a long meta-narrative, just one long poem written by a fictitious author named John Shade with notes by a fictitious editor after Shade's death. The excerpt Kay recites is by Shade referring to a previous point in his life where he had a near-death experience, and in that he sees a tall white fountain before coming back to life. Experiencing grief after his daughter's suicide, Shade tries to come to terms by searching for knowledge of the afterlife. He comes across a woman's account in a newspaper where she too saw a tall white fountain before coming back to life. This comforts him. But as he tries to follow up, he finds out that there was a misprint in the newspaper. She didn't see a tall white fountain. She saw a tall white mountain. This doesn't change what it meant to him. The image of the tall white fountain had meaning, not because it was objectively true, it never was, but because Shade ascribed meaning to it. it was real for him. I cannot emphasize this point enough. This is the base of the movie. This is constant throughout, and it's the main thread. Kay finds out that he was born, and therefore he thinks he has a soul, which gives meaning to his life.
To be born is to have a soul, I guess.
He later finds out, of course, that this isn't the case, but again, just like the tall white fountain, the meaning it was given is what makes it real. Meaning was something that was always determined by him, and it's what he gives himself by the end. Meaning, real, importance. They are all self-defined. Quick story reminder for context. Through his investigation to find the long-lost replicant child, Kay's led to an orphanage where his supposedly fake childhood memories took place. Through his own recollection, he finds a wooden horse from said memory, confirming that it is indeed real and thus he might be a born replicant. Grappling with the implications of this, he goes to verify this with an expert memory creator, Dr. Anna Stelline. She's a meticulous, soft-spoken, and compassionate character, introduced as having a compromised immune system since she was a child, and thus in a contained space with hologram technology. What we can interpret right away is that the world she lives in is one of holograms, or not real. Of course, it is real because it's created the person that she is, and for her, it is her reality, even if this forest no longer physically exists in their world. She starts working on a memory of a birthday party, with birth being the primary focus to the realness question, and the birthday celebration, which is often a strong foundation for many people's childhood memories. In the scene, she admits the memories give stability to replicants and laments that they live difficult lives.
Replicants live such hard lives. I can't help your future, but I can give you good memories to think back on and smile.
It's nice.
It's better than nice.
Subtly laid out in the beginning of the movie is the suggestion that we are the culmination of our experiences and memories, one good subtle example being the garlic that Kay smells in the beginning. But now the suggestion comes front and center with the most important line of the scene.
It feels authentic, and if you have authentic memories, you'll have real human responses. Wouldn't you agree?
If it feels authentic, you will have authentic memories and thus have real human responses. And just like the source material to which the original is owed, the rhetorical questions have returned. Yeah, she's talking to Kay, but he's off screen, and so the question is really directed at us, the audience, to consider. When he asks her, how can she tell if a dream is real, she responds,
They all think it's about more detail, but that's not how memory works. We recall with our feelings. Anything real should be a mess.
how you react to the world is based on your memories, and your memories are not defined objectively, but rather emotionally. Finally, to wrap this scene up, she looks into Kay's memory and verifies that it is indeed real. Now, of course, later on we find out that it isn't his memory, but actually Anna's. Oh, hey, look at that. They're literal reflections of each other. Wonder if that'll come back in the film. However, it doesn't matter if it was his own memory or not, because he believed it to be real, and thus his response was real.
I know it's real.
He had a real human response. There's a setup, and there's a payoff. This certainly would have been a fine time to cut the scene completely, but the movie cleverly goes just a little bit further. Kay goes outside and looks down at his hand as he feels the snowflakes fall on it, now interpreting his reality as an individual with a soul. The scene extension also helps guide us back to the precinct for his second baseline test, which proves to us he's changed right at the end of the first act.
Scans said you didn't look like you on the inside, miles off your baseline.
He thinks he's real, and so he has become real. If Dr. Anna Stelline was a real woman living in a fake world, Joy is the inverse. She is a fake woman now capable of living in the real world. Joy as a character is conveyed in the movie seemingly as a contradiction. She is initially introduced as a 50s housewife adjacent hologram apparatus for emotional comfort to purchase. And yet, shortly after that brief introduction, many of her interactions with Kay don't feel far off from how a real partner might support their loved one. However, whenever Joy starts to feel a little too real, we're again quickly hit over the head being told she's fake. And this can be confusing for audiences, but the point is, you're supposed to question or doubt if she's real or not real. Okay, let's cover her first scene. As I said, 50s housewife intro, blah, blah, blah. Okay, now she switches over and asks to read Pale Fire. We may be getting a little hint here that she's something more. Like, why would a people-pleasing piece of software have taste?
You hate that book.
I don't want to read either.
Wouldn't she just simply like what he likes? Or perhaps it's the suggestion that her experiences with Kay over time that have built a truer personality. Okay, now I confess this could just be another follow this pale fire thread reminder, so I'm not going to put too much emphasis on this. Again, we have a line about subjective importance.
What's the occasion?
Let's just say it's our anniversary.
Is it?
No, but let's just say that it is.
Like, it's not really their anniversary, but what's an anniversary really? It's just a celebratory reminder, so who cares? They have chosen to define the importance of today as opposed to it actually being the day. But here's where the important part of that scene comes in. She can go anywhere, and she goes to the roof, i.e., outside for the very first time. Here it is she who looks down at her hand and is experiencing rain. Remember, she's not actually experiencing rain. Her programming is generating rain onto her hologram. But even though the rain is not real, the experience is real. She may be a hologram, but she's having a real experience and thus having a real response. Oh. These experiences, these are the things that create our memories and as a result, create us. Just like how replicants are manufactured, it is through their experiences that they start to become real. Joy is really the same as a replicant, just without a physical vessel. But just as she feels at her most authentic, the movie reminds us of her limitations so we can again self-debate about the way in which we define her. Now, the next scene with Joy is more important for moving the plot forward purposes, but there's a little note I want to make here. There's a comparison between DNA and programming bits, which I think might be a setup or at least a benefit to a later sequence. Again, there's a suggestive question. What really is the difference between real and artificial intelligence? On to the love scene. Oh god, it's actually pretty important. This is after the second baseline test and Joy invites Mariette to be the physical surrogate to sexy time. Now, this symbolic lined up hologram physical action is really supposed to get us to think about sex and intimacy. You can't have sex, of course, without the physicality, and you can't have love without the emotional connection. Without either one, a vital component is absent. Again, the movie is presenting questions about what is important. What is real or true? And it tries to play with the dials with these extremes so we realize how subjective our definitions really are. Is the personality the most important part to this love scene, or is the woman who's simply just a physical vessel? It wouldn't be a love scene if he was just with a sex worker, and it wouldn't be a love scene if he was just with an intelligence that was only a hologram. But just in case this comparison validated Joy's existence in realness to that of Mariette's, the movie again puts doubt into her realness by cutting to a billboard of Joy. In the morning, Joy, being protective to Mariette snooping, kicks her out. Before Mariette leaves, she spitefully tells Joy that she isn't all that deep or real.
Quiet now. I've been inside you. Not so much there as you think.
Joy is visibly deflated. Perhaps she too is internally questioning her own existence, much in similar fashion to Kay with his own existence.
Coffee.
Somehow, this moment feels genuine though. So, the movie has made her feel real with her own agency, physical surrogate to represent it, but then puts doubt into our minds only to finally swing back around once more with an intimate moment between two beings we traditionally would define as not having souls. Now they have to leave because Kay most certainly won't pass another baseline test and thus be destroyed. In order to protect Kay, Joy begs him to delete her off the main console in order to prevent any pursuers from accessing any memories about him. So, yet through another experience, Joy becomes more real and is closer to us.
Like a real girl.
Okay, last scene coming up with our Joy. Kay eventually meets up with Deckard in Vegas, gunfight, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Kay asks Deckard.
Is it real?
I don't know. Ask him.
The dog may or may not be organic or real, but to Deckard, the dog's existence and his experiences with the dog is real enough. After some questions, mostly plot point related, they take a break and Kay rests. Joy starts walking around examining containers full of what I believe is plant life or algae while Kay's asleep. If she really was a product made to tell Kay everything he wants to hear, why would she be exploring on her own while nobody's watching, looking at life that she may not necessarily be like? This shows a level of curiosity, which is sentience and independence. Again, our experiences are what create us. Kay is then awoken to the dog staring at him. It starts on his face, then cuts to the dog, then cuts to a shot of the dog walking away, back to his face, and then back to Joy. This is the Kuleshov effect on full display here. The Kuleshov effect is when the sequence of shots are more impactful than any of the single shots in isolation, a tool typically used in conjunction with shots of faces in order to convey how we should feel or perhaps understand what a character is thinking. The cinematic language is telling us that he is looking at her the same way as the dog. As in, does it really matter if she's real or not? The dog's realness doesn't matter to Deckard, only his experiences with the dog. And so too now he thinks with Joy. Kay looks at Joy and is considering that the question of her realness maybe is irrelevant. Only his experiences with her matter. I just want to comment how wonderfully subtle this sort of thing is. An amateur editor certainly would have ruined this. And if you're hoping to be an editor, this is the kind of level of thought and care that goes on at the mastery level of storytelling. Okay, so villains come in and F up. Towards the fight's conclusion, the Emanator is dropped while Kay lays defenselessly on the floor. Joy pleads with Love not to kill Kay, but Love, being envious of Joy, walks over to kill her. The moment before she's killed, Joy tells Kay that she loves him.
I love you.
In her death, she is at her most real, just as vulnerable to demise as we all are, and it is here that Kay feels that loss. Love leaves him to die in pain, purely out of spite. Kay's rescued, pale campfire, flyby Joy billboard, and land. I'm gonna need you to retain as much as you can about these next three scenes. Kay awakens to a sympathetic Marriott who introduces him to the leader of the Replicant Freedom Movement in a room that's eerily reminiscent of Wallace's, what the f do I call this room? Office? She herself is reminiscent of Wallace. Black-clad clothing, semi versus fully blind, leader figure, and a willingness to sacrifice life for what they ultimately believe in. Now, the movie is not saying that she's just as evil as Wallace or that her goals are not noble or understandable, but more of a parallel for the type of people who are trying to find existential meaning behind things that they find important for society or on the bigger scale. She offers advice that will stick with Kay for the rest of the movie.
Dying for the right cause is the most human thing we can do.
She then proposes that Kay joins them and to kill Deckard to prevent Wallace from finding the replicant child. Finally, the scene wraps up with Kay learning that he is not the replicant child and concluding that Anna really is. The switch from Kay's recollection of Anna's face to Deckard's face is a further confirmation of this and transitions us to Wallywater office room. Wallace enters the room first with a threat.
Always jumping that one. Never a thought what to do if it made land. All the courage in the world cannot alter fact.
He, of course, brings up Rachel as the key and shows her skull. Creep. And then introduces the question, was Deckard and Rachel's fate a calculated decision by Tyrell?
Did it never occur to you that's why you were summoned in the first place? Love? Or mathematical precision? Yes? No?
I know what's real.
And then he offers an identical copy of Rachel. Genetically, she is exactly the same as the Rachel Deckard once knew, but he knows what's real, and we too, the audience, know that this isn't the same Rachel. The love scene was to make us think which element was real. Here we have a similar question, but also a much more obvious answer. Both Rachels are here, but the one we instinctively consider to be true is gone. Deckard here makes a choice.
Her eyes were green.
If you were honestly curious, no, they weren't, but that doesn't really matter. He's obviously rejecting the offer. Okay, we're here. We've arrived. We're at the scene. Or maybe you just skipped here, in which case, please go back. First, I want to address a relatively common interpretation that has made the rounds on the internet and sort of hijacked all discussion about this scene. In fact, some of the memes that shaped this interpretation were even developed before the movie came out, more relying on the visual cues from the short clips they saw and then developed as people saw the movie. And indeed, there is some truth to what they saw. Kay is sad while facing a giant hypersexualized disconnected advertisement. Through these visuals, the interpretation is that Kay looks at this giant Joy advertisement and realizes that Joy he was with was just a product, and so he might as well go out guns blazing or something to that effect. I really don't want to get too deep or bogged down in the psychoanalysis of incel culture, one for brevity's sake and two for my own sanity, but this interpretation is largely driven by anti-consumerism, which the movie does speak to, and a deep-rooted insecurity that all women are incapable of loving someone earnestly. Joy is fake, and it was all a consumer societal ploy to keep them placated. This is the most cynical view, and although some of the elements certainly do align, sexual commodification of women used to support a caste system, the overall message is actually different from this interpretation. Okay, so what is it saying? Let's go through this step by step. First, it's a match cut. A silhouette of Deckard cut straight to the same silhouette of Kay. Now, we'll get back to this in just a second. Now, Joy, who I'm going to call Pink Joy, is large, obviously pink, blue-haired, eyes blacked out, just different than all the prior versions of her we've seen. She is as out of touch as possible with the intimate Joy we know. When Pink Joy comes down, she says the same line as our Joy said in the beginning.
It was a day. Huh? What a day.
But this time it's not the same as before, but rather this disconnected sexualized tone and that silhouette match cut. It's a deliberate connection between the two characters. See, in this scene, Kay is essentially being offered the same thing as Deckard was in the previous scene, an exact replica of his deceased loved one. Rachel was, by DNA pairs, exactly the same, and Pink Joy is, bit by bit, also exactly the same. But just like with cloned Rachel, we again instinctively know that Pink Joy isn't the same as the Joy we knew.
I can fix that.
Kay realizes this truth that Pink Joy can't fix his loss. Then she says,
You look like a good Joe.
This is the head spinner. This is the definitive line that's supposed to make us doubt original Joy's realness. And when I saw it for the first time, it's what I focused on. Many people do, and that's what drives that cynical interpretation. But you have to think about it. It's just like the tall white mountain. It doesn't change the tall white fountain. Whether she was fake or not is a question that misses the point completely, as it no longer matters. The movie has told us that our memories create us, but in these ending scenes, it starts to suggest that perhaps the only thing that's truly real is not our subjective definitions, but rather our shared experiences that have built our connections with each other. And so this scene is telling us that Pink Joy could not replace our Joy. New Rachel can't replace our Rachel. Kay doesn't go out to buy a new Joy. Deckard didn't accept a new Rachel. Kay does look sad at this advertisement because he knows no one can replace the collective set of experiences that he had with the previous Joy, not even an assumed identical copy. It is here that he fully accepts she's gone and that part of his life is no longer around. Now stripped of everything, Kay's free to make a choice of his own. He looks down at Deckard's gun and remembers what Frasier and Sapper told him.
Dying for the right cause is the most human thing we can do.
Because you've never seen a miracle.
Now, remember, he kind of has three choices offered. He could follow his programming, the wishes of Joshi, and kill the replicant child, Anna, thus preventing a change of the status quo. He theoretically could hand Anna over to Wallace and bring on a replicant evolution, but ultimately pain and suffering for all of replicant kind. Or he can follow what Frasier asked of him, kill Deckard to prevent Wallace from discovering Anna so that there would be a replicant revolution later on. All of these things are big important as we would typically define important, but here's what's critical. He rejects all of these requests. His bonds to society are broken, not in a spiteful way, but in a self-determined kind of way. Granted, what he does doesn't necessarily hurt the replicant freedom movement, but it isn't exactly what they asked for, and more importantly, the motivation isn't exactly the same. In this scene, finally a free agent of his own devices, he chooses what he feels is important to him. There are no obligations or expectations, and yet even though he is completely free, he values choosing to help reunite a father and daughter. He finds his own meaning to his life, and he believes in it so much that it's worthy of his life. The music amps up, and we get what I think is one of the most confident and intense climaxes in modern cinema. I mentioned before that love is a vessel for messaging about self-determination versus versus obligation, and this fight scene is that theme wrapped up into the main one. Kay is able to break his bonds, ultimately find his own meaning, while Love, despite her strength and passion, can't ever seem to escape her chains. There's plenty more to say about this character, but I'm gonna have to end it there. So, Kay has made his own meaning and is fighting for it against someone who is passionate about something they believe is important for society. Finally, to the end. As Deckard enters the building, Kay walks up and sits on the steps. Again, he looks down at his hand to experience snow, to experience life. But this time, he's given himself a meaning. He's given himself a soul. He's lived a full and real life, and he dies comfortably knowing this. And so the scene with naked Ana de Armas is that breakover point, reinforcing what was set in the prior scene for us to realize that our shared experiences create us and our connections, how meaning and realness is created within ourselves, and that when we decide to help others not out of obligation or importance, but out of our own free will, we give ourselves our own humanity, even if we somehow weren't traditionally defined as human. And of course, the most important line is always last.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd say so. Oh, that was a long one, folks. What? Did you want treats? We gotta go get treats. Hold on. I'm a little fat.